Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss planetary transits or Gochara for April 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so keep that in mind. If you're not familiar, Vedic astrology or Jyotish is ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So it seems like the theme for this month is bringing order to chaos. I don't know if that's going to be complete, but at least there's some attempt, it looks like. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish are my videos. All of my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk on my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, my channel is all about playlists, so that videos, on different topic areas are easy to find. Like I have a Graha's Planets playlist, Bhava's Houses playlist, Yoga's Planetary Combinations playlist, and there are others. If you'd like to learn astrology by, looking at famous birth charts, like famous people, places, and moments in time, which I typically do in my monthly talks, monthly transit talks, but you wouldn't know from the title that I actually cover famous bird charts. But anyway, there's a bird chart archive list 2024 video that's up that has a list of most of the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel. In the video you can find them in, but I'll be updating that soon since it's about a year old now. So also, if you're new to Vedic astrology completely and you want to get more out of talks like this, which are mostly interpretation talks, I would just take a look at the list of these videos here, like north, south, east, and south charts, introduction to navigating a birth chart, the lugna, ascendant, rising sign, the first house, all different names for the same thing. This list of videos is, I think, the ones I would go to first to set a foundation for yourself, and then move out from there. Also, if you've been following along mostly, but maybe missed a few videos, my newest teaching videos have been Virgo, constellation or Kanya Rashi, days of the week or Var, and then spiritual combination of Srikanth, Srinath, and Virenchi yogas. Okay, so let's take a look at the dates where things are moving around in the sky in April. 1st to 6th of April. So 1st of April is today as I'm recording this. We're going to have a planetary war between Mercury and Venus. Okay, so like it didn't actually pop up on my software, but Mercury and Venus are going to be within 5 to 10 minutes of each other. So almost in the same degree, just barely not. So I guess that's why the software isn't clicking off on it. But and they're going to be in this position for almost a full week. Okay. April 2nd, Mars will enter Cancer or Karaka. April 3rd, Mercury enters Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Also, Venus crosses Rahu. So the thing to know about this is that once Mercury enters Purva Bhadrapada, and I'll go into more of this stuff later, but I'm just pointing out, just at the list of dates, like which dates are going to be probably the most impactful. Once Mercury enters Purva Bhadrapada, there's going to be 4 planets or grahas in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra until April 11th. Okay. So already just from these few, the planetary wars and Mars moving into Cancer, if you don't know, Mars is debilitating Cancer, and Mars is like an action planet and kind of rebellious planet. So there's going to be quite a bit of, I would say, chaos going on because Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra is symbolized by a funeral pyre. So smoke and flames and, things turning to ashes, essentially. And then on top of that, we don't have just one planetary war, but actually Venus is going to be in planetary with Saturn from April 4th to 11th. Yeah. April 7th, Mercury goes progressive, and it's going to be in the same degree as Rahu that day. And Saturn and Venus will both be sandhi, meaning they're going to be within a degree or so of a crossing line from one constellation to another. That's a very unstable place. And then the thing is, by April 7th, so in the middle of these 2 planetary wars and all this stuff, Mercury, Rahu, Saturn, and Venus are all going to be within the basically 2.2 degrees, 2.5 degrees to 1 degree of Pisces, again in Purvadrapada, that funeral pyre energy. Okay, that's going to be pretty intense. Just put it that way, unfortunately. Then April 10th, Jupiter enters Mrigashirsha Nakshatra, and that does play a bit in there because Jupiter's aspecting into Pisces, where all this conglomeration is going on at the beginning of the month. April 11th, Mercury enters Uttar Bhadrapada. That's going to be better because Uttar Bhadrapada has this energy of being a little bit more objective to the chaos. It's also symbolized by a funeral pyre, but it's kind of like, getting to a point of just objectivity and surrender to changes that are happening, the transformation that's happening. Mars enters Pusha. That's also going to be better. Pusha is an energy of like kind of nurturance and emotional stability, which is going to be needed, especially, okay. Then April 12th, there's going to be a full moon in Virgo or Kanya in Chitra Nakshatra, and the full moon is going to be aspecting into Pisces with all this other stuff. So it's going to be, more emotional stuff. Venus goes progressive that same day. April 13th, Sun enters Aries or Mesha. So that should be, positive in some ways because Sun is exalted in Aries. And so, the Sun represents career, it represents, a high position, it represents leadership, it represents soul, represents health. So looks like, again, mid-month, there's going to be some new trajectory with leadership, hopefully bringing us out of what seems to be a pretty complicated mess in the first half of the month. And then Saturn crosses Rahu that same day. April 20th, Venus crosses Rahu. And then it goes into planetary war again with Saturn until April 27th. So you can see Venus, the planet of love and romance and relationships, is going to be quite compromised the whole month. Okay. Then April 25th, Venus enters Uttar Bhadrapada Nakshatra. So again, even Venus, is starting to get, untwisted, unentangled, move out of this entangled mess that we've got at the beginning of the month and become a little bit more objective and surrender to, the transformations that are going on. And then April 27th, Sun enters Bharani Nakshatra. There's also a new moon in Aries. That's all happening. So, that's going to be a lot of new energy for, leadership in the regions, right? Because Sun represents like king or president and moon represents queen. That same day, Sun enters Uttar Bhadrapada. So again, a little bit more objectivity. And Mercury enters Revati, which is more hospitable, type of nakshatra. So you can see the things already just from this list and knowing the basic placements of and how things are moving. At the end of the month, should start to see this big mess at the top in the first half of the month start to unravel a bit and moving forward and out of it. And then April 29th, Rahu and Ketu are Sandhi, so they're going to be unstable because they're going to be moving in the middle of May. Okay, so that's just like an overview of dates and some basic energies going on this month. Okay, so here I have birth charts for the beginning of the month and the end of the month, so we can see how the sky pattern is changing. So on the left side here we have April 1st, 7:10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's New York time. Time is a little bit arbitrary because what I was trying to do with these two charts is basically give a natural zodiac, create a natural zodiac. So natural zodiac is when the first constellation of Aries is in the first house. Okay, so if you're not familiar, I use North Indian style charts in my work. The rising sign, also known as the lugna, ascendant, first house, that is identified by the top diamond in the middle. There's a little 1 in the bottom corner in these charts. That 1 is not there because it's the first house. The 1 represents the first constellation. So that means that the first constellation of Aries is in the first house. Okay, and then to get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house up into the back or counterclockwise. So the second house is this upside down triangle in the top left corner with Jupiter and Moon in it and a little 2 in the bottom corner. That's the second house. Then you count all the way around 12 houses. Okay, so anyway, the reason why I'm setting these up as both natural zodiacs, and you can see they're both set to 1 degree of Aries, is because the natural zodiac, when you put Aries, the first constellation, in the first house, It essentially creates a birth chart or horoscope for the entire world, or you can think of it as collective energy. Okay. So let's take a look at April 1st, and then we'll take a look at April 30th. So in the first chart, the moon is in the nakshatra. Nakshatra is a lunar mansion, if you're not familiar. There are about 27 lunar mansions, and every night the moon passes through a different one. So after 27 nights, you get a lunar month. And each of these nakshatras has a different energy associated with them. Okay, so the moon is in the nakshatra of Kritika. Kritika is a dual nakshatra, in that Kritika has this energy of fighting. Okay, like because the symbol of the deity associated with Kritika is Kartikeya, who's the commander-in-chief of the celestial army. So, victorious and strong and valiant and all these sorts of things, and a fighter. But there's also, and I don't think this is talked about as much, there's also this notion of, kind of nurturance and foster mother associated with Kartikeya or Kritika nakshatra, because Kartikeya was raised by different foster mothers. So there's this fighting, nurturing energy. So it's sort of which way we're going to go, and the moon represents the mind. So the moon is trying to figure out how to approach this time period, you could say. Then the dasha period, the dasha is the planetary period. The dasha period for April 1st at this moment in time is Saturn, Rahu, Mercury. And Saturn, Rahu, and Mercury are all in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. Okay, and Saturn and Rahu are specifically, Mercury, not yet. Saturn and Rahu are in the, again, nakshatra of Purva, which is symbolized by a funeral pyre. Okay, smoke, flames, ashes, okay? And Mercury is heading that way. Okay, so, and Saturn represents tradition, structure. Rahu is unexpected energy. Mercury can represent communication, friends, business. So there's a lot of loss here, okay, in the 12th house, because you can see up in the 12th house here, we've got 5 planets going on. That's a lot of energy. That means that all the houses that are owned by these planets, so Saturn owns the 10th house, the 11th house, Venus owns the 2nd house and the 7th house, Mercury owns the 3rd house and the 6th house, and Sun owns the 5th house. We have 7 out of 12 houses, their energy is basically shunted into this 12th house of losses and expenditures. Okay, that's a lot. That's kind of intense, right? And so there are a bunch of yogas in this chart. Some, helpful. There's a Sunafa yoga. There's some support, maybe a little support for the moon, not a whole lot, because Mars, you can see I've circled it there as karako, bhava, nasha, which means it's going to be challenged because Mars represents siblings and it's in the house representing siblings, and sometimes that can create conflict, either with siblings or the siblings are having conflicts either way. The 3rd house also represents neighbors. Okay. I think the 2 big helpful ones here we have a Shubhakartra yoga. So we have natural benefics on either side of Aries. We have Jupiter in the 2nd house, and we have Venus in the 12th house. We also have Mercury in the 12th house. Moon is becoming more benefic. It's a little bit weak because it's a sandhi. It's in the first 6 minutes of, it just crossed into Taurus. And it's also a dark moon because it's, it's just gaining light again because it just went through its new moon phase during the last eclipse on the 20th of March. So this pattern with benefics on either side of the lagna, the rising sign, 1st house, is called a Shubhakartra yoga. Kartri means scissors, and Shubh means good, positive. So this combination cuts through obstacles. So that's very nice to have. Okay, the other thing we have going on is we have a parivartana yoga, exchange of houses between Jupiter and Venus, and those are the 2 great benefics. And so especially with Jupiter coming into this 12th house, which it owns, it should help protect against some of these losses here, at least in terms of material things. Okay. It will not necessarily protect people and relationships, and that seems to be what's on the funeral pyre, frankly. Okay, also this conglomeration of 5 planets in 12th house, that's a pravraja yoga. It's a life focus yoga. There's also a Gajakesara yoga because of the position of Jupiter and Moon, and then Venus coming in there. That's a networking yoga. So there's also a Balarishta yoga here because 7 out of 9, so this is more on the negative side in terms of yoga. 7 out of 9 classic Jyotish planets are in negative houses. So when we have, 4 or more, typically, I see it as a Balarishta yoga. Balarishta yoga can signify, like if this was a person's chart, it would potentially signify difficulty in childhood, or maybe to the extent where like the child does not survive childhood, whatever reason, physical reasons, medical reasons, emotional reasons. So there's a lot of challenge here, despite, it's like a very highly contrasted chart at this moment in time. And then I mentioned the karaka bhava nasha Mars. It's also bhavat bhavam, so that's also troublesome to some degree. So bhavat bhavam for Mars in this case means Mars is the owner of the 8th house of long-term deep problems, and it's gone. The 8th house lord's gone 8 houses away. Mars is also unstable because it's sandhi, so this is like a lot of problems with siblings and neighbors, long-term problems and siblings and neighbors. Yeah. Okay, and then you can see also, if you look closely at the degrees in this 12th house, Sun is moving out of here, and we'll move out of this, but you can see Mercury and Venus are retrograde. They're basically almost in the same degree. Like I said, they're only about 5-10 seconds apart, minutes apart. And Rahu and Saturn just switched from Aquarius, shifted from Aquarius to Pisces. But you can see that as Mercury and Venus go retrograde, like these 4 planets, the Mercury, Rahu, Saturn, Venus, are all going to crunch together in Purva Bhadrapada, and basically again, first to 1 to 2.5 degrees of Pisces. That's going to make all these planets stable, and again, double wars, and it's like, it's a very precarious moment, frankly. And it's basically that's going to be the worst point, kind of almost a flashpoint potentially. And then after that, like mid-month, Mercury and Venus are going to start to go progressive. They're going to start to move out of this mess. And then, unfortunately, Rahu and Saturn are going to cross. That's probably going to be another flashpoint. But then, moving into May, Rahu's going to flip into Aquarius. So anyway, there's a lot of sorting, that's going on here through the month of April. Okay. And again, sorting through, trying to salvage losses is what I put here. Yeah. So then, end of the month, what really changes? Well, you can see Jupiter and Moon are in the same house, and Mercury, Saturn, Venus, Rahu are in the same house. Although you can see Mercury and Venus are starting to again get away from the 2 malefics there, Saturn and Rahu, which are causing quite a bit of trouble. And Ketu's in the same position, although Rahu and Ketu again they're in the for what it lasts or first. Half degree, so those are becoming unstable. The only thing that's really changed is that Sun has gone into Aries and Mars has gone into Cancer. So Sun is exalted, that's great, but Mars is debilitated. And the thing about it is Sun and Mars are the 2 fire planets. They're also the 2 leadership planets. So we're going to get like exaggerated leadership stuff going on here. Okay, the Sun represents like the president's, CEO type person. And that's going to be strong. Okay, and in this, by the end of the month, Sun is in Bharani. Bharani is a nakshatra symbolized by a womb. So it's a, a really intense, energetic nakshatra, and it symbolizes cycles of life and death. So this, again, could be like the burgeoning of new leadership, potentially of a government or authority here. But the thing is, the dispositor or the owner of Aries is Mars, and Mars is debilitated here. So even if there's this, energy or force that seems to come forward, the question is like, is this going to last or is it going to stabilize? Because we still have like, instead of 7 out of my 9 planets in negative houses, now we still have, 5 planets in negative houses. So it's still a precarious moment. Yeah. But Moon in the second chart is in Rohini. that's going to be a much more kind of peaceful energy for the moon or the mind, the public, at least temporarily, because the moon's shifting every day. But Rohini's like the most seductive, attractive energy for a nakshatra. So, especially because Moon and Jupiter and Venus too, because of the parivartana exchange of houses between Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter's in a house of Venus, and Venus is in a house of Jupiter, so you can kind of exchange those in your mind. So that means two big benefics with the Moon in the second house of oral communication, speech, family, assets. Um, the thing, though, that's kind of creating drag on that second house, because the second house looks pretty good. Well, there's a couple things, actually. Excuse me. Saturn, since it's moved into Pisces, is now aspecting the second house. So that's going to bring things down. And again, Saturn as a planet on its own represents obstacles, delays, structure, antiquity, tradition, death, chronic illness, chronic problems, is aspecting the second house. And K2 is as well. And K2 is, again, unstable because it's sandhi, the first degree of Virgo. It's aspecting the second house as well. And K2 has this kind of hidden, unexpected, kind of explosive energy. Okay, so this might be sort of like sweet speech, kind of, how do I say, like, speaking softly or smoothly or maybe diplomatically over pretty big losses here. And the thing is, Saturn is in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. The 12th house is also hidden enemies. And Ketu's in the 6th house of acute issues and obvious enemies. So, yeah. So it's still challenging here, but at least there's some. It may have seemed like not a whole lot was actually moving forward because Sun and Mars were not in strong positions. And they will be in strong positions at the end of the month. Sun in a positive direction, Mars in, I would say, more negative direction. But the dasha period for the second chart here is Moon, Venus, Mercury, Rahu. So that's already telling me a lot. Like Moon and Venus are the two emotional planets. Moon and Mercury are the two mind planets. And Rahu can be like unexpected, hidden energy, ambition as well. So as I mentioned, all these planets in the 12th house, this could definitely be like a loss of relationships and things like that. And so it's sort of like trying to move on, sort through that mess, and like move on to like better times, better days situation. Yeah. Because again, with this many planets, and the thing is, the moon during the eclipse, moon was in this 12th house as well. So we had 6 planets there. And then Jupiter, you can almost think of it as 7 planets because Jupiter and Venus, can exchange. So it's almost like 7 planets in the 12th house. That's also why there's been a lot of, news about international trade and tariffs and, all this sort of thing. In the news. So let's see, yoga's here, Ubhachari. The sun is nice because we still have this, Shubhakartra yoga over the lugna. That's helpful. And it's also creates a Shubhachari solar yoga. That's also going to support the sun. That's nice as well. The parivartana yoga is still going on between Jupiter and Venus. Pravraja yoga is still in the 12th house of focus. Vajrakesari yoga. So again, still networking. And again, this might be networking, especially after loss, like maybe trying to establish new relationships, if ones have been lost. Rahu and Ketu Sandhi, they're unstable. So again, it's mostly like Sun and Mars shifting here. Those are the big shifts by the end of the month, which is still positive considering what we've just been through. But I could see this, if we're looking generally at this last chart, second chart here, it's like a birth of new vital energy because the sun, again, it's a lot of fire. It is what it is. It shines and brings life and growth. So luckily the sun's in a positive position, although it is aspecting its debilitation sign in Libra, in the 7th house. So that can be problematic because Sun is aspecting the 7th house of relationships, independent business, and Mars is aspecting there as well. So there could be a lot of arguments and possibly even military action going on. That's a possibility. Yeah. So what did I write here? Birth of new vital energy, maybe even authority in government. We might see, new leaders popping up or new organizations, governments popping up potentially. They're seeking freedom and happiness at home. That's unstable because this Mars in the fourth house represents home and happiness. So there's some attempt here, but it might be fighting for these things, rather than just like, being completely passive to all the losses. It's a time to, start moving forward. But again, I would say there's new aggressive efforts or position by partners involved here because the Sun and Mars, um, it's going to be less stable in the seventh house because Sun's debilitated. Mars is still coming from debilitation position. But the other thing is the Lord of the seventh house is Venus, and Venus is 6 houses away in the house of acute troubles with this, again, Mercury, Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Rahu combination, which is pretty virulent. Okay, so what else do we have here? Let's see. Okay, so now I'm going to go through, different planets and discuss a little bit more in depth about what's going on there. Although I've given you an overview, and then I'll be, mixing in also famous birth charts that are very similar to current sky patterns, so that you have a way of like seeing how some of these energies are embodied rather than have it be all abstract. So on this slide, we have Mercury and Venus, Buddha and Shukra. So again, 1st through 6th of April, Venus-Mercury planetary war, graha yuddha. Whenever that happens, you have a war between planets. That means both the planets and the houses that they are going to be stabilized. Okay. This is happening in Pisces, the dual water sign, where Venus is exalted, Mercury is debilitated. So that, again, we have this like exaggerated condition here with Venus and Mercury. And being in a dual water sign, we're talking about mixed emotions, confusion, and maybe even obsession here because Rahu is in there, and Rahu can bring that kind of energy. So, again, with three malefics here, Sun, Rahu, Saturn, and Rahu, Saturn being Purvadapada, this could be leading to unexpected or strange restructuring or endings here. But especially Venus and Mercury, Venus represents the heart and Mercury represents the head, so head versus heart issue. But there can be losses of friendships, communication, business, art, even this would be like social mishaps, very strange social phenomenon going on here, kind of bizarre stuff. Then 3rd of April, Mercury enters Purva Bhadrapada. So we're going to have 4 planets in Purva Bhadrapada. Again, the funeral pyre energy. And Venus crosses Rahu. So I would say this is even more exaggeration of what I've just talked about, and maybe even a flashpoint. Because again, what's in this Pisces house is affecting Jupiter, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Saturn signs. So, it's Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Saturn, it's like 8, they each own 2 houses, so that's 8 houses, and Sun owns 1. That's 9 out of 12 houses are going to be affected by this, like, pretty big hit here. Um, then 4th through 11th of April, Venus and Saturn are in planetary war. So it basically means like Venus is in war with 2 different planets. I mean, and Mercury and Saturn are the 2 kind of distance, objective, you know, um, so it's somebody who's like, fighting, like emotionally and with compassion or whatever. And it's like they're up against this like strange, cold, distant, calculating energy, you know. Even though Venus is the winner here, I mean, again, when planets go through this planetary war period, they both get beat up, so it's not fun. Even if there's a, quote unquote winner, it doesn't feel like winning. But Venus versus Saturn, tradition versus emotion, structure versus creativity, structure versus flow. So, and Saturn again represents, endings, long-term problems. So this could be like the end of relationships, creative projects, travel, pets, luxury goods. These are all things that Venus represents potentially. I think it's going to be more that way because, again, both of these planets are going to be in Parivartana. It's going to bring out more of this negative energy of Saturn. At least Venus is there. So again, Venus, I think, is like kind of once it moves into Uttar, down here. When does it do that? Oh, at the end of the month. It's going to be a little bit more objective. Like this is kind of like somebody who's trying to be diplomatic and objective. I mean, diplomatic and compassionate and kind, but it's just getting thrown in their face, basically. Like things are still blowing up, like no matter how good they're trying to be. I mean, I think eventually, like, again, Vedic astrology is all about karma. So this could be trying to make the best, trying, despite the opposing, pretty negative, nasty opposing forces here, still trying to be good, a good person, because Venus also represents humans, right? And still trying to, rather than shut down and become mechanical, like potentially this other energy is, trying to maintain, protect the heart and things you love and things that you value. So April 7th, Mercury goes progressive. It's going to be in the same degree as Rahu. That's going to be unusual thoughts, decision, communication, like weird stuff out of the blue. Venus and Saturn are going to be sandhi, so in the first degree of Pisces. So again, all four of these planets, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Rahu, between 2 and 36 minutes to 1 degree and 2 minutes of Pisces. Again, all in Purva. This first week of April is going to be pretty tough, but starting to move forward, starting to actually untangle from this mess, starting to move forward, but still very unstable. You might wonder, like, are we going backwards? Like, it might also feel like you're getting sucked into some sort of black hole, that you can't control. That's also possible. April 11th, Mercury enters Uttara. So yay, that's Uttara, still the funeral pyre. But again, there's this notion of like conscious release. There can even be this like energy of like a reincarnation, like dying to the old self, but Mercury is like the rational mind, analytical mind, and Uttara has at least this notion of like being able to take a step back and, consciously release from, the previous attachments or chaos or whatever has been going on. Okay. So I'm seeing this as like gaining perspective, objectivity, clarity, and freeing the mind from this, again, sort of black hole negativity stuff that's been going on earlier in the month. And then April 12th, Venus goes progressive. So Venus is starting to like, again, move forward out of this, tangled mess here. And this could be, again, the starting, not quite yet, but, at least moving in the direction of rebuilding relationships, art, after a loss or at least a restructuring here. Then 20th through 27th of April, on the 20th of April, Venus crosses Rahu. Again, weird stuff going on with the relationships, sudden left turns, stuff out of the blue. And then it starts planetary war with Saturn. So unusual directions, unconventional structure of relationships, potentially of advice, maybe strange advice here. Because all three of these are going to still be, they're still, well, in the middle of this, Venus enters Urtara. So towards the end of this planetary war period with Saturn, like the 25th and 26th, 27th, Venus is going to start to get objective. It's like starting to like get past this, like, cut your losses from this pretty, again, intense, nasty, destructive energy, in whatever form that shows up in your life, Um, But so again, April 25th, Venus entering Uttara, but I'm seeing this like emotional surrender and letting go. Like I've done what I can. I've tried to be good. I've tried to do things in the right way, and I just need to like walk away or let it be. Either way. Um, April 27th, Mercury enters Revati nakshatra. That's also going to be nice. Revati is like it's about hospitality and travel, and it's also it's much. It's the kind of the nicest, most gentle nakshatra in Pisces. So, Purva Dropad is pretty intense and destructive. Uttar Dropad is kind of like being objective about it, and Revati is about, again, moving on, traveling and reestablishing good times, good energies here. So this Mercury and Revati, I think, will bring some grace to mind, decisions, communication, business, education. So again, we're starting to like climb out of this black hole towards the end of the month. Okay, so here's a chart, and this is actually the earthquake that happened about a week ago. That happened in Myanmar and Thailand, a 7.7 earthquake. I thought some people, it's kind of like history in the making. I'm sure since it's such a big, strong magnitude earthquake, it's always going to be in the history books for a while. But I thought we'd look at it because, again, I don't think this is, if we're looking at how the current sky patterns, energies in the sky, planetary energies are manifesting in the 3D practical mundane world, well, here's a pretty good example, I think. So this earthquake happened 28th of March 2025, 12:50 p.m. in Sagaing, Myanmar. This is the epicenter of the earthquake. So the Lugna Nakshatra here is Punarvasu. Punarvasu is symbolized by a quiver of arrows. So this energy of like an arrow, like it's sitting in the little box on your back, like a backpack, and you take it out, string it on the bow, let it fly out, and then you go retrieve it maybe and bring it back. So there's this kind of like energy of having a home base going out and coming back. So there's this back and forth to home energy going on here. The sun nakshatra is Uttar Bhadrapada. So again, objectivity and chaos, and the sun represents like leadership. Moon nakshatra is in Purva Bhadrapada, so this could be a public disruption, but also a mental disruption as well, because the moon represents the mind, especially the emotional mind. The day lord for this moment in time is Venus, and the Hora lord is Sun, so leadership with compassion. And then the birth dasha, planetary period currently going on, is Jupiter, Venus, Sun. So again, leadership, we keep getting leadership. And Jupiter and Venus, diplomacy, and also charity as well, because Jupiter and Venus in this chart, this parivartana exchange of houses between Jupiter and Venus is going on between the 10th house of daily activity and the 12th house of not just expenditures and losses, but when you have the two great benefics in the 12th house, this could be in like charity. So this could be like international support for the nations, Myanmar and Thailand. So how does it recreate the current sky pattern? Well, it's almost exactly the same, frankly. And the social context around this time was Eid was going on and Navratri were going on. So two big, Muslim and Hindu, religious traditions. And what was interesting is that when I was looking up Sagaing, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It's in a very congested area where there's a bunch of temples. So it's not like off in the country where nobody lives. That's part of why it was so destructive. But what's interesting here is that we have a Gemini rising chart, and Gemini as a place represents like congested areas of people. So it's like literally, sorry, and Mars is there. So Mars is like an action or activity. Mars is rebelliousness. Mars also represents land. And you can see Mars is, at the end of Gemini there, it's getting unstable. And the ascendant is very unstable. It's like literally, a few minutes away from being Cancer. So there's a lot of land instability in congested places, which is, again, the epicenter here. The other thing is Gemini is a dual air sign, okay? So that represents like two different opposing ideas. So I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. But then when I was reading about it, apparently Myanmar has been in a civil war. So two different ideologies fighting each other. And Mars represents like, military action potentially. And Mars is in Punarvasu, not just the Lugna, but Mars in Punarvasu. So like this could be like rebellious militia people coming out, and kind of attacking, going back home. And apparently that was very disruptive to these, kind of charitable global support drops to these countries, especially Myanmar, because these rebels wouldn't ceasefire even when this earthquake happened. Like they wouldn't even stop to let the charitable goods or whatever come in from other countries. They just kept like fighting and destroying. It's kind of a mess. But anyway, you can see all that at the top here, at the top of the chart. But I just thought it was interesting that like these two big, um, religious traditions are happening at this time. Because the other thing is that these areas of the world, like Southeast Asia, they tend to be like a bit of an admixture of different religions. So yeah, it's so again, duality of ideology. And also Eid and Navratri, again, Eid is the end of Ramadan where you've been taking different actions than you normally do. And Navratri, you're taking different actions than you normally do, you know. For both of them, there's like potentially fasting and like praying and, chanting like spiritual scriptures and things like that. Um, and again, I thought that was interesting that this was all happening in the area of all these temples in Myanmar. But also Thailand as well. Like the earthquake traveled that far that buildings fell down in Bangkok in Thailand. So again, even there, like there's a dual urban area, two different urban areas that were affected by this earthquake. So let's take a look house by house. Some of it I've already talked about. So Gemini, Mithuna, dual air sign, Sandhi, Mars. So unstable, ideological, divided place. So again, that's a civil war going on. Cycles of action and violence at home, civil war. Congested area. Yeah, so again, Bangkok was mentioned, buildings falling down that far away, and the temples here, and other buildings in Myanmar. The Lugnatia Gemini, sorry, is Mercury. It's retrograde, combust, debilitating nicha. Very exaggerated Mercury, and it's an Uttar. So again, there's some destruction going on here, but trying to be objective. And that may be like these rebel groups who are refusing to stop fire, even for whatever, a week or two to get some, donated supplies in there to help people. I mean, it's pretty tough. And the Lugnatia, the ruling planet for the chart, Mercury's gone to the 10th house of Arta. So Arta Stana, house of Arta is, there's a material motivation here. So there's trying to, you can see there's the pravraja yoga, focus yoga is in the 10th house now of daily activities. And this sorting process, right, which is now linked to the 12th house of, charity, losses, expenditures, and also international aid and trade with the 10th house. This is like Mercury's trying to sort through, like trying to create logistics, trying to sort out the logistics and operations with all of this challenge stuff going on. Yeah, trying to get the supplies in. Just I mean, it's hard enough when you have earthquakes and your infrastructure is collapsed partially or fully, and then now you still got militia people like going places. So and that won't stop. So yeah, and then the Rahu, there's like a drive or ambition to lead operations for international airlift charity distribution and distribute the charity contributions. Um, the other thing that's important, like why specifically was an earthquake coming? And if you watch my, uh, what was it? If you saw my last eclipse video on the 29th of March, which was less than 24 hours after this moment in time, or even if you go back to December when I posted my what was it? December solstice video. I mentioned several times that there's probably, dual natural disasters going to happen, um, possibly like earthquakes, that sort of thing. And specifically in this chart, what you can see is Mars and Saturn. Okay, Mars is in almost the last degree of Gemini, so I would consider that Sandhi. Saturn is literally going to flip into Pisces, again the next day. Those two planets, Mars and Saturn, are what we call bhumi karakas. They're planets that represent or symbolize land, and they're both unstable. And then the thing is that since Saturn, you can almost kind of see Saturn, um, all these planets that are in Pisces are basically also, for the most part, aspecting the fourth house of Virgo, where Ketu is. Ketu's is going into Sandhi. Okay, Ketu's an explosive energy, so is Mars. Mars is aspecting to the fourth house. So those two alone, Mars and Ketu, are going to bring a lot of explosive energy. And then Saturn, once it crosses, Saturn's going to be aspecting in there. And the fourth house represents like land, especially like land underground. So you have the two Bhumi Karakas, Sandhi with Ketu, like it was kind of a perfect astrological storm for a earthquake to happen. So yeah, but it's also affecting things psychologically as well, because especially the Saturn, really malevolent Saturn, is with the moon. And when you have Saturn with the moon like that, that's called sati. That's a loss of a big support system, long-term support system. And then Saturn is going to be, again, flipping into this mix of Sun, Venus, Mercury, Rahu. So that's going to be pretty tough as well. Venus and Moon are the two emotional planets, and Mercury and Moon are the two mental planets. There's going to be a lot of emotional stress to face here. And the fourth house also represents happiness. So it's like all of that land, underground, happiness, home, all, you know, exploding essentially, or imploding, exploding, falling to pieces. Yeah. So let's just take a look at the other houses here fairly quickly. The second house, the Lord, is a dark moon aspected by an exalted Jupiter. It's going to be public news about this event. Third house Lord is Sun. It's aspected by Saturn, Moon, and pravraja. This is like a public fear, difficult to ascertain, physical communication, trouble with neighbors. Like, these two are neighbors, yeah. Fourth house Lord is Mercury. Ketu's there in Uttara Phalguni and aspected by Sun, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Moon. Again, even though the eye goes towards Pisces, because you've got 4 planets there, even more destructive potentially is, what's going on in Virgo. And that's, again, the earthquake that happened here. Explosion underground, loss of people, disruption of home and happiness. Fifth house Lord is Venus, which gives like objective, practical advice because of Venus's position. Dealing with acute problems, issues here. Sixth house Lord is Mars, aspected by Jupiter and Venus. It could be help or compassion with acute issues. Seventh house Lord is Jupiter, aspected by Mars and Saturn. Partners, unstable land, also engineering potentially. So yeah, disruption with partners, partnerships, business. Eighth house Lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars, Jupiter, K2. Unseen psychological disruption. I'm sure people were spinning about this. It was a pretty big earthquake. A lot of people also lost, because that would also be this Venus and Jupiter in the 12th house, right? Because Venus will protect, because Venus is going into its own house in the 12th. That'll protect against some material things, but probably not human life or sentient life like animals and stuff like that were lost too, I'm sure. Then the 9th house, we have a Swa, Saturn, Moon, Sati. So loss of support system, lack or end of structure of a chaotic government or authority. So not sure, especially with the civil war going on. I don't know who's in charge. Maybe they don't even know who's in charge, or maybe people want help, but they don't even know where to bring things to or who to bring things to distribute them to people. Otherwise, it all just it's wasted or whatever. Doesn't get anywhere. Then the 10th house Lord Jupiter, and then we've got again Sun, Mercury, Venus, Rahu, Saturn, Moon. So focus on daily activity, trying to sort out the logistics and operations with all this stuff. 11th house Lord is Mars, aspected by debilitated Saturn. So again, destruction of groups and incomes, and daily life. And also it's a kamastan, enjoyment, like disruption of all that. Then 12th house Lord is Venus, aspects its own, and Jupiter and Saturn aspect here. So Saturn, once it flips into Pisces within a few hours of this moment in time, it's going to block this charity. It's Jupiter and Venus across the Taurus and Pisces, the 10th and 12th house. So this could be a blocked aid coming in, which is essentially one of the problems that happened, trying to help, people in that area. So yeah, there you go. The recent earthquake in Myanmar and Thailand. Okay, so on this slide we have the slow-moving planets, slowest moving planets, Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, and Rahu Ketu. So the first part of the month, I've basically already talked about how these planets are involved. So April 3rd, Venus crosses Rahu. It's going to be unexpected things with, like, especially relationships, creativity, maybe pets, maybe vehicles. Then 4th through 11th of April, Venus and Saturn are in planetary war. And then April 7th, Mercury and Rahu are in the same degree. So again, for those, the kind of details on that, I would go to the previous planet slide. But otherwise, on April 10th, Jupiter enters Mrigashira and Nakshatra. So that's going to be a pretty big shift because Jupiter's been in Rohini, and Rohini, again, is like a very luscious, productive, attractive, stable, creative type energy. Mrigashira now is starting to get more, like there's more movement involved with Mrigashira. The symbol of Mrigashira is a deer's head. So you can think about like deer starting to move through the forest, they're moving, they're grazing, and that sort of thing. There can be it's kind of a seeking, searching type of energy, like deer, it's the way they move through the forest. So, and Jupiter represents things like balance, fairness, justice, spirituality, and education. So there might be like, especially with all of this stuff going on at the beginning of the month, it's like, not just assuming or, kind of complacent with what's going on, but how do we seek fairness and justice and balance to, this conglomeration that's going on, this kind of tangled mess that's going on at the beginning of the month. Then April 13th, Saturn crosses Rahu. Again, Saturn represents tradition and structure, and Rahu's like, unusual, unexpected twists. It might even be like literally a twist. So you could see innovation meets tradition and structure. April 20th, Venus crosses Rahu. There's a planetary war with Saturn. So again, I would see the previous slide on that because I've talked about that already. On April 27th, Saturn enters Uttarabhadrapada Nakshatra. So again, starting to become objective in a slow rebuild to all the fallout that's been happening with the big conglomeration of planets in Pisces and aspecting Virgo as well. So slow rebuild to those areas of life or a chart. On April 29th, Rahu and Ketu going Sandhi. So again, they're becoming more unstable, and when they're unstable, that means even more weird and wild stuff can start to happen. And they'll be, I believe they're changing signs. I want to say May 18th, so around there, middle of May. So again, it may get a little bit, it's just saying, it's almost like this. How do I say? It's almost like an extended eclipse period here. Because you have so many planets, in alignment with that eclipse, and the parivartana with Venus, and again, all the planets are basically this last eclipse. It really did a number, I think. So we're going to start to unravel ourselves from that and start to move forward. Okay, so here's another chart, similar to the current sky pattern. This chart is for the first time a human was in space. Okay, so this happened April 12th, 1961, 9:07 a.m. in Baikonur, Kazakhstan. This was a Russian initiative here. I think that the ship name is Vostok 1, Vostok 1, I want to say. Probably not saying that correctly. Anyway, Yuri Gagarin was the pilot. He was the sole pilot. Well, actually, he wasn't a pilot. He was the sole. That's also what's interesting about this chart. I'll talk a little bit more about why I was a little bit confused by this chart, but then it made sense when I read deeper into the history or the kind of backstory for this moment in time. that Yuri Gagarin was the first human in outer space, he wasn't actually a pilot. The settings on the rocket ship were on autopilot, essentially. He did have the code to switch that if need be, but he didn't use them. So essentially, the rocket ship was controlled by an autopilot system in the ship and then from ground control on Earth. So he was basically more of a passenger than a pilot. Okay. But so Lagna Nakshatra here, Rohini again, attractive, most attractive, da 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 da. Really fascinating and lovely thing potentially to happen. And I'll talk about why. Again, the backstory here, I almost kind of felt was kind of more interesting than so getting the human into space. Because again, like if the ship was basically controlled on autopilot and the ground control, and he wasn't steering essentially piloting the rocket ship and was just a passenger, like technically he was the first human, but it was like they had sent up dogs and not to diminish his contribution. He still had some guts, to get in this plane and potentially go off in outer space, whatever that entailed, So definitely some valor and, courage there. But yeah, as we go through the chart, I think maybe you'll see a little bit of what I'm seeing and why I was kind of confused, but then it kind of made sense. Anyway, so the sun nakshatra Revati, travel and hospitality. Moon Shatabisha. Again, Shatabisha translated as 100 healer, so this can be problems with the mind. And you can see Moon is very close to Ketu. So when we have Moon with Rahu and or Ketu, what would be or Ketu? Rahu and Ketu on their own can bring mental illness, mental health, kind of illusion, delusion, confusion, obsession, compulsive energy. And then especially with the moon, and moon and Ketu are both in Chaturvisha, this could be like a very obsessive activity here. And I think it was. Essentially, I think what this is referring to in this chart is the space race. Because the Soviets and the US were obsessed about fighting it out in terms of who was going to get into space and up to the moon, all this kind of stuff. So that energy was showing up here. The day lord is Mercury, Hora lord Saturn. So again, objectivity here. The birth of Shah, Rahu, Sun, Saturn. So Rahu is in the fourth house of land, property, tradition, lineage. Sun, again, that's and Sun is in Revati. So who's going to be the kind of king or leader of travel? Okay. And then Saturn, you can see Saturn is Swan, its own sign, Capricorn, in the ninth house of government authority. So very kind of strict, conservative, structured government. Saturn, though, is in Uttarashada Nakshatra, which is all about like a piercing victory. So clearly, like you can start to see already, like there's a lot of competitive energy and like obsessive energy going on in this chart. And Saturn is with Jupiter. Jupiter is in where Jupiter's debilitated. So Jupiter, again, being debilitated is like not so much justice, fairness, balance, rights, even potentially. And the other thing is Venus, the other, great benefic, natural benefic, is compromised, even though it seems really strong because it's an exalted position and retrograde. Those are two primary strengths. Venus in this chart, because it's so close to the sun, is combust, so you can't see Venus. So the two big diplomatic, compassionate planets are compromised big time. Okay, so this is not like a friendly rivalry. This is not a friendly rivalry. The other thing is that I don't know if I should bring up now or wait, but the other thing that was weird, well, it's getting into like why this chart seemed weird to me. Okay, because again, if we're talking about like we weren't talking about the first rocket ship in space. We were talking about the first human. Again, Venus and Jupiter represent humans, and they're both compromised. Okay. So, and diplomacy and compassion lacking here. So again, what I'm also seeing is like it might be that this was basically performed or created under duress. Okay. And so when I was reading about the background here, apparently the lead rocket engineer, his name was Sergei Korolev, he was falsely arrested for being anti-Soviet at some point, was thrown in prison, and, survived those circumstances. Like, apparently, just the nutrition or whatever, apparently he lost a lot of his teeth from scurvy, so he wasn't even getting enough vitamin C to maintain his body. And, there were reports of, I don't know specifically with him, but like torture and forced confessions and all this kind of stuff going on. Okay. Anyway, somehow they discovered his training talent because he was being trained as like an aeronautical engineer. Somehow, I think maybe because of his mentor and whatever political connections there were, whatever. Anyway, what they did was they slightly reduced his prison sentence um, if he would basically help the Soviets with their space program, develop their space program. So he was sent to Germany to learn about the German space rockets there because those were really virulent against like Britain, I guess, during what was it, World War II or something. So anyway, the thing about him, okay, is that he was not, even though he was basically the one designing the rockets and the whole program or whatever, he was invisible, as was the ship itself. So when we have Venus combust, that means you don't see externally, when we have a planet, we don't see externally the things that the planet normally represents. So Venus represents vehicles. Apparently, this whole thing, I was looking to see, none of this was televised. Like, they only let the news got out about this only after it was successful, but it wasn't like a live viewing, on TV like we do today. The other thing is, again, Venus being combust in the vehicle, um, you don't see the. It's just weird that you don't see it. So again, like they shrouded this whole thing in mystery. You couldn't, they had no idea that this was happening. The other thing is Venus represents a worldly practical advisor. So you don't see the worldly practical. So you didn't see Sergei Korolev. Apparently, he was only referred to as the chief designer, never by his name. And apparently, they said the reason why they were trying to protect him from whatever forces, like maybe getting kidnapped or assassinated or something by the US. Who knows? Okay. And like I'm saying, the backstory is actually a little bit more intriguing, I think, than the actual human in space, thing, actually, when you read about it, when you learn about it. But the other thing is, like, they did not reveal until after he died that he was actually responsible for leading the whole Soviet space program. And it said in his like biography that he lived in constant fear of like the pressure of performing and making this happen and all the political pressure and la la la, which, not surprising, right? So, especially if he'd been thrown in prison and, lived that reality, I think, for at least 6 years before he was sort of bailed out. But again, like, it's not like he was a truly free man, I don't think. He was just sort of a lackey for the Soviet government and, their agenda with beating the United States and this whole, obsession with, obsessive competition, essentially. So anyway, that's the backstory. So let's get back to the notes here in order, so we have some semblance of flow. So the birth dasha, I talked about that. So how does this recreate the current sky pattern? Sun is there in Pisces. We have a retrograde combust Venus, which we did have about a week ago, just a couple days until the 27th of March. So that was the same. Mercury is, there in Pisces as well. Saturn's aspecting Pisces, so Saturn's in Pisces now. So we have that basically four planets, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Saturn currently in Pisces. Mars is in Gemini and Purnavasi, that's the same. Jupiter and Saturn are together, which they currently are in Pisces, because Jupiter's in parivartana. Rahu and Ketu are on the Aquarius Leo axis, which they're moving towards. They'll be there soon in the middle of May. And Jupiter is aspecting all the Earth signs, like it is currently. So again, I just thought it was so weird that there was a combos Venus for this major vehicle historical moment. That's why I was digging into the history of I'm like, do I even have the right chart? Because it didn't make sense to me until I read the backstory, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, it makes sense. there was a lot of hidden things about the whole project. The whole project was hidden, and the advisor was hidden, and the vehicle was hidden, and la la la. Yeah, and also potentially like lack of compassion, diplomacy, and fairness with the people involved. Again, if this was really pushed by a high level government agenda, which sounds like it was. Okay, so let's go through house by house and see what else we see. So the Lugna is Taurus Vrishabha, fixed earth sign, aspected by Jupiter and Shravan. This is going to be a news story here. Most attractive news story about unseen vehicle, unseen advisor voyage. The Lugnatia, ruling planet for the chart, is a combust retrograde exalted Venus. That's what I thought was so weird. I was like, how is this possible? But it makes sense now. And Venus has gone to the 11th house of Kama. It's an enjoyment house. So this is like fun. um, yeah, each their own, I guess. Sun is in Revati, Mercury's in Uttar aspected by Swa, Saturn, Uttar. So group objective, acknowledgement of leadership government. So again, this kind of event was to basically validate itself as like the West government, essentially. Again, we have a pravraja yoga, we have a Buddha Ditya yoga. That's an intelligence combination, especially regarding math and science, and that unseen leader, right? Kamba's Venus guy clearly had that going on. We also have a Lakshmi yoga here. I would say almost, except that Venus is combos, but Venus is very strong, and the ninth lord is, excuse me, very strong. So this would generally create a Lakshmi yoga, except it may be that there's hidden money, a lot of hidden money going towards this. Like, that may be another part of this, like, hidden designers and hidden engineers and, all this energy going into this thing. And then just like pop one day, like it's in the news. Oh yeah, the Soviets has, sent a human into space, so successfully, like brought him back alive and all that, So, the other thing is the moon has a Shubhakartra yoga around it. So it's got positive, natural, benefic planets on either side. That's going to support the moon. So even though there's this, obsessive mental health, clearly mental health or almost mental breakdown stuff. And I read during the blast off or during the flight, which lasted 108 minutes, apparently, Korolev, like they had to, like, I think give him medication, sedate him because he was so anxious and he had a lot of health issues, which not surprising given what he survived, but he kept pushing himself um, to whatever, pony up whatever the Soviet government was wanting from him. So he really hurt himself. Like he was also obsessive compulsive, probably because he was worried about what consequences would come if he didn't comply. So so what else? Yeah, so all these yogas, focus, intelligence, money, and also no limits. Again, we have the Shubhakartra. It's like despite the obsessive push here, um, there's going to be it's like open sesame type of energy here. So it's going to let things happen, let things, it's not going to thwart the effort. It's going to cut through all the limits or obstacles here. Second house Lord is Mercury, Mars there in Purvasi. So dual talk and activity about going home and coming back. So I think this is basically indicating that it wasn't so sort of honest or forthcoming. Whatever story or news came out of here, it was only a partial truth, which again, they didn't even acknowledge Korolev until he died, about his contribution to this whole thing. Third house Lord is the moon, is Shatapisha, aspected by exalted Jupiter, Saturn. This is winning, winning at limiting, strong neighbors or partners, sibling, again, sibling rivalry type stuff, with the United States, I guess. And I don't know if there are other countries as well, but those are the two main ones. And then fourth house, Lord, Sun, Rahu's there in Maga, which is the throne energy, nakshatra, aspected by Moon. Obsession with being like the big, head honcho leader here. there's like, and fourth house is again like a happiness. So, but there are long-term problems here because the Lord of the fourth house has gone 8 houses away. So, trying to establish itself is like a big cheese. Um, Fifth house here, fifth house Lord's Mercury aspected by its own planet, and then Sun, Venus, Mars, Jupiter. Strong leading advisor, also a law. Like, yeah, again, I think this is bringing in this like because he was even if he was falsely accused, like technically he was a criminal. um, So yeah, but he had the goods, right? He had the intelligence and know-how and knowledge or whatever to make things happen for the government and put them in at least a potentially stronger position outwardly. Um, sixth house Lord Venus, aspected by Saturn, where it's exalted. Strong, successful enemies again. Because again, it was only about a month later. Yeah, in May 1961, the U.S. had a successful flight with a human being. So, again, they were neck and neck here. Then the seventh house, Lord is Mars. Long-term competitive issues with partners or relationships, I would say, because the Lord of the seventh house has gone 8 houses away, so it's long-term issues. And eighth house Lord is Jupiter, aspected by Mars, a competitive mindset abroad. Ninth house Lord Swa, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, successful, controlled, legal authority. Although it's like, the legal stuff is probably a little sketchy or mysterious because Jupiter's debilitated here. Then the 10th house Lord Saturn, Moon and Ketu in Shatabisha, obsessive work, mental struggle here, long effort, like I can really see the struggle, mental, emotional struggle here. And the 11th house Lord Jupiter, and then again Sun, Venus, Mercury, Saturn there. As above, but it seems like it might seem like a celebration, like a group or public celebration, but Venus is combust. You can't see Venus, and Venus is like the, party social grace planet. And when you have Sun there, like president, and you have Mercury there with Saturn, Mercury and Saturn are like objective, cold, calculated. Like, it's said that there are like all these public, you know, celebrations and parades and stuff like that, but I'm guessing based on this that might have just been like a kind of a engineered publicity, or forced publicity. Kind of coercion was, involved in that. Yeah. Anyway, then the 12th house Lord is Mars. Again, international competition, leaving home, coming back, like again, the space race essentially. So there you go. And again, another example of how all these energies piling up on that Pisces Virgo axis has played out in human history. Okay, so now Sun and Mars, which we've been kind of talking about the whole time. So Sun and Mars against Surya and Mongol, two fire planets, two leadership planets. April 2nd, Mars enters Cancer, Karaka, where it's debilitated, and it's a movable water sign. So this could be like a lot more impulsive emotional actions. I don't know if it's better or worse for Mars, because Mars was an enemy sign in Gemini, and Gemini is like a dual air sign. So it was probably like toggling back and forth with, ideas, like aggressive ideas, and now it's like emotionally, like this could be like emotional outbursts and stuff like that, impulsive emotional actions, yeah. So either way, not great energy for Mars itself, although Mars, whether it's in Gemini or Cancer, has been aspecting into Capricorn. So even though we haven't been talking about Capricorn, there's been something building in Capricorn. Wow. April 11th, Mars enters Pusha Nakshatra. So Pusha is symbolized by a cow's udder. So there's like nurturing and stabilizing, emotional stabilizing energy there. again, Mars is still debilitated, but there might be at least an attempt to kind of, nurture that sort of thing. The other thing I was thinking about is that, Saturn, now that Saturn has moved into Pisces, Saturn has been aspecting both Aries and Scorpio for 2.5 years. That's been a lot of drag for Aries and Scorpio rising people. Um, and so even though, and Mars owns, rules both Aries and Scorpio, and Mars is debilitated. So I have a feeling like it's kind of what I was seeing here is like Aries and Scorpio people kind of recovering from the Saturn being on their sign the last 2.5 years. Hopefully, recovering with less of that weight from Saturn, because Saturn's a pretty heavy duty energy, especially when it's in Purva Bhadrapada and Shatabisha. It hasn't been in nice, friendly, easy breezy nakshatras for a while. So hopefully, Aries and Scorpio people will start to feel a little bit lighter, able to move forward. April 13th, Sun enters Aries or Mesha and Ashwini nakshatra simultaneously. So the Sun is exalted in Aries. That's nice. It's also a movable fire sign. So a lot of actions here. So again, there might be big pushes by governments and authorities and leaders and things like that. April 27th, Sun enters Bharani nakshatra. Again, that's Bharani is symbolized by a womb. So there's could be cycles of leadership, birth and death, and turnover of leadership as well. Okay. So, at the end here at the slide, I've written like, both of these leadership planets, they're both going to be exaggerated in two different directions. Sun's going to be stronger, at least in Aries, but it's aspecting again Libra, where it's debilitated. And then Mars is exaggerated as well. So Mars is going to be debilitated in Cancer and exaggerated in Capricorn. But I guess the question I have is that will whatever pops up in April and May, well, especially Sun is going to be in Aries mid-April to mid-May, and then I think Mars is going to be in Cancer till the end of May. Will whatever, because again, fire energy, it's not always like sustainable. So I'm just wondering, like, there will be like it looks like a lot of maybe even aggressive actions, but will they stick? I guess that was my question. Yeah, so I guess it depends on who and where and how in their birth chart. Okay, then the moon, Chandra, in April. April 12th, there's a full moon or Purnima in Virgo or Kanya and Chitra. Chitra symbolized, that nakshatra symbolized by a gemstone, cut gemstone. So it's all about architecture and structure. It's a friend sign, a dual earth sign for the moon. So, very practical in nature. And it's going to be opposed to all this other stuff going on in Pisces. And the moon, again, is the mind planet, emotional planet, intuitive planet. So again, thinking about how to structure or sort through again this mess and confusion. I think trying to decide what is of value and what stays and what goes. And then April 27th, there's a new moon or Amavasya in Aries or Mesha with Barney, so with the sun, exalted sun. So it's a neutral sign, a movable fire sign. So this could be developing not just a leadership, like actions leadership, but developing a mind and identity as a new leader. Because again, moon and sun, I want to say, I'm not sure though. I think that, let me check, hold on. So I think I was confusing different phases of the moon or when and stuff like that. But anyway, this April 27th, I was thinking maybe it was a Sudarshan Lugna, but it's not. But the thing is, this new moon and this exalted sun are in the ninth house of that moment in time, which the ninth house, again, authority, leadership. So, although that will create a karako bhavanasha with the sun, so difficulties or problems with authority. So, yeah. So anyway, and then I always do a separate videos to get into depth on the new and full moon cycles. So watch out for those. And then our last chart here, famous chart here, this is the start of the American Revolution. So you can see right at the top, we have Sun and Aries, kind of like where we're heading. And again, leadership. Yeah, and Sun is in Ashwini here. Ashwini is a nakshatra symbolized by the Kumara twins, which are the celestial healers, and they ride around on horseback, and they're kind of this rescuing energy. So especially, since Aries is a movable fire sign, and Ashwini specifically, there's a lot of like pioneering energy, especially with fire and Mars and stuff like that. So this is a pioneering, rescuing energy right at the top. The other thing is that Sun and Mars are in parivartana. So not only is Sun exalted in the Lugna here, first house, but Mars aspects into their super strong Lugna, super fiery Lugna. You have the two fire planets and a movable fire sign. A lot of activity. Okay, this was essentially when the first shot of the American Revolution was uh, played out. Okay, or why did they call it the shot that went around the world? I'm not sure why, because it happens a lot. But so that in and of itself tells you that this chart, this moon time, had a lot of fiery military leadership, pioneering, rescuing energy. Okay, super strong. Okay, on top of that, okay, as if that wasn't enough, you can see on either side of the Sun in Aries, you have Venus and Jupiter. Right in the second house, you have Mercury on the other side. So you have three benefics flanking the Lugna and the Sun. So that creates two yogas, planetary combination. Again, the Shubha Yoga, so the scissors that cuts through obstacles, and you have a what is it? Shubha Ubhayachari Yoga. So basically, all those benefic planets are supporting the Sun. The government leader or whatever. So I mean, I kind of was like after that when I saw it, I was like, I'm not sure I need to say anything. But I will, because I do, just to be complete. But just from that, you can see why, again, the American Revolution was eventually successful in creating a new country. But the other thing I was thinking about, like, even though other people have focused on the signing of the Declaration of Independence that happened on July 4th, 1776, so about a year after this. And most people do, like, that's our Independence Day or whatever. And I think that moment in time seemed to be more about the deep philosophy and thought process because it was like hashed out, by all these like intellectual high thinkers, and stuff like that. From this chart here, the start of the American Revolution, you can also see why, the United States, quote unquote, is one of the most powerful countries in the world. You know, whoever says that, right? I mean, um, when you have a revolution starting like this, and this is essentially the beginning, maybe the signing of the Declaration of Independence wouldn't have happened before, wouldn't have happened unless this chart was so strong, because this is a precursor for that. So I was just like, whoa, this chart really kind of blew my mind, just even from that. Okay. But I'll go through the rest of it. So the Lugna Nakshatra Ashwini, again, pioneering, rescuing energy. Sun is on Ashwini. That just adds leadership to the leadership and pioneering, rescuing. The Moon Nakshatra, Moon is in Jyesta. So Jyesta is a nakshatra, is symbolized by a talisman. It's all about protection, but it's in Scorpio and in the eighth house. So like this is like how would I say, like a deep transformative energy. And also Mars is not aspecting here, eighth house. So that also is going to strengthen the eighth house. And Mars is in Magha Nakshatra, which is symbolized by a throne. So this is all about, transforming and overtaking the government and the throne. And, quite angry, people, public, mob, psychology as well. Day Lord is Mars, so more Martian energy, more fighting, military energy. The Hurrah Lord is Venus. This is an emotional fight here. Okay, the birth dasha, Mercury, Moon, Venus. Mercury and Moon, the two mind planets. Moon and Venus, the two emotional planets. And Mercury is debilitated in the 12th house here. This is like a loss of rationality. This is like, forget all this. Like, this is like an explosion of like emotions and, not a very rational move here, but very successful and strong nonetheless. Okay. Um, yeah. So, recreates a current sky pattern. Well, Sun is in Aries, or will be soon, in Ashwini. Mercury and Jupiter, Venus, Shubha Yoga over Aries. That's happening. Rahu and Ketu are on the Aquarius Ketu axis. So we're moving towards that. So yeah, you can see this is all happening. Oh, forgot to mention this. The particular time for this moment in time is 19th of April, 1775 in Lexington, Massachusetts. The exact birth time was sunrise, which I looked up was 5:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's this chart. I set this chart to. Okay, so let's just go through the notes pretty quickly because I think I already said all that you mostly need to know. But again, Aries, Mesha at the top, movable fire sign, char Agni, exalted sun, and Ashwini, parivartana with Mars. Lots of fire all over the chart. Action, fighting, leadership, pioneer, huge, strong leadership, rebellion, rescuing military ruler, much action, all this kind of stuff. Shubhakartra Yoga Relugna, cutting through all obstacles. And the thing is that since we're running Venus, Mercury, Moon, Venus, that means that both sides of the Shubhakartra Yoga and this Shubha Ubhachari, those two yogas, Venus, you can see Venus is at Swa in the second house. Venus and Jupiter in the second house, this is going to be a lot of money too. Just in fact. So you can see, like, wealth coming in here. But these positive protective yogas are all being activated this time. Okay, so it's like whatever this massive action, forward, pioneering, protective action, it's going to be successful, probably more than they anticipated. Second house, second house, Lord, Swa, Venus, Sandhi, Jupiter, and Kritika. So speech is about, again, fighting and nurturing that critic energy, that dual energy there. Third house, Lord, debilitated Mercury, Gochara, Bhadrapada. So again, being objective here, but losing objectivity, I would say. Like this is like a flash blow up point, where it's just like, forget it. We're tired of talking and trying to negotiate and trying to be reasonable. Like, we just got to take matters into our own hands. And then again, Saturn is in Hasta, which it's funny I said that. Saturn's in Hasta. Hasta is actually symbolized by a hand. So Mercury aspecting the sixth house that it owns, the sixth house represents enemies. This could be like literally taking control of, objectively taking control of, enemies. And also taxes as well, because what kind of taxes and tariffs and duties and all this kind of, because what was happening was Britain at the time was trying to basically squeeze what they could out of the American colonies. And, and the Boston Tea Party happened where they dumped tea symbolically into the water and all this sort of thing. Because, again, Britain was trying to squeeze more of what they could out of the United States, or what was the 13 colonies at that time, because they had lost. I think that was the reason why they were trying to squeeze the colonies, American colonies, was 7-year war that was going on. So all these like European nations were fighting, and that drained finances for Britain. So they were trying to, scrum up the, cash to keep fighting or protect their interests or whatever it was. So, and the Americans were just like, we've had enough. So that's how that all, that's why this all kind of blew up eventually. But yeah, so you can see like trying to, just losing all rationality and saying, we're just going to do this is, yeah. So what else? The fourth house, Lord Moon, aspected by Mars. So fighting for land and happiness. And again, Mars is aspecting, when you do the parivartana exchange between Sun and Mars will aspect in Cancer, where again, it's debilitated. So, it's fighting for these things, an unstable fight, but a fight nonetheless. Fifth house, Lord Sun aspects its own with Mars and Rahu. And Mars and Rahu are in Maga. This is like obsession with gaining military and government control. That was the other thing that happened was, so I think the Americans were like, the colonists were, upset about the taxes and the duties and getting, pinched financially. So they were starting to rebel. And then what the British were doing was they were like confiscating arms and military weapons and stuff like that to kind of try to quell the rebelliousness. And then it was just like, no, it just literally probably blew up on them. The American colonists can only take so much, I guess. So Very aggressive thought leader here. I mean, even obsessive. I mean, this is a very strong mental position here in the fifth house. And intellect. Yeah. All about, gaining control and government authority. Yeah. So the sixth house Lord Mercury aspect its own house, retrograde Saturn. Again, strong tradition of strong traditionalist enemies, and also taxes, tariffs. That's the 612 axis there. Then the seventh house, Lord Venus, aspected by Mars and Sun. A lot of military action, long-term issues with relationships as well, because the Lord in the seventh house has gone 8 houses away, and it's in Critica. So, fighting with partners, business partners, like the British. Then the eighth house Lord is Mars, aspect its own sign, and we have moon there debilitated, aspected by Venus and Jupiter. So this is fighting for basically human rights, is what I'm seeing here. And then the ninth house Lord is Jupiter, which is in, sandhi, so it's unstable government. Jupiter is with, two positive planets. I mean, because moon it's not full, but it's bright, it's strong, even though it's debilitated, but it's going to be exalted in the second house, and Venus is swa there, so the two emotional planets, very strong. Yeah, so very emotional but unstable, nurturing, fighting government going on here. I think and it's a dual, again, Sagittarius is in the ninth house, so this is a dual action. So it's kind of like, which way do we go? Do we fight or do we just go along with how things are? So I guess fighting is the way they ended up going. So, and then the 10th house Lord is Saturn, aspected by Jupiter. Physical fight, again, or nurturing due to lack of fairness and justice. Again, the colonists getting squeezed financially and then trying to suppress their, rebelliousness to that. Just finally blew up. Then the 11th house Lord is Saturn. Ketu's there in Shatabisha, aspected Mars and Sun. Explosive group fight. I mean, this is, literally what's going on. And also philosophical nature, because Aquarius is a fixed air sign. So this is a physical, explosive group fight based on philosophy. Then the 12th house Lord is Jupiter. Debilitated Mercury is there, aspected by Mars and Saturn. So engineering, loss of enemy trade and tariffs and duties and taxes and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, this all started in April 1775. The American Revolution lasted until September 3rd, 1783. And again, as I mentioned, this is basically derived from the Americans revolting against so many taxes, and they even boycotted British groups, and the British were trying to suppress their rebellion, and then it all just came to a head, essentially. But you can see here, a lot of, again, Sun in Aries, and Mars in Cancer, and Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, and Taurus and Pisces. So, again, this is kind of where we're heading towards the end of the month and then into May. Okay, so as always, thanks so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. Appreciate all the different ways you guys support my work in the channel, whether it's, listening to videos or liking them or subscribing or sharing or sending in donations. All of it's very much appreciated. So thank you for all of that. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous charts, you can look at my birth chart archive list 2024 video for the moment until I update that soon. I do offer individual birth chart readings. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. I do have another channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, so other Vedic arts, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too, if that's interesting to you. So, as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.